So in this video, we're going to look at how you take this chart that Excel produces and turn it into something that looks more like a typical graph that we'd plot on paper in a physics lesson. So I've got my three sets of data displayed nicely here, but missing lots of stuff. So if you click on the chart area, then you get this little green plus up here in the top right hand corner, and this allows you to turn lots of things on and off. So I could turn the axes off, but I don't want to do that. I'm going to turn the axis titles on. I can put a chart title in. I don't usually want data labels. I think they make it look a mess. Error bars are something we'll come back to later on. For grid lines, it's quite often helpful to have these minor grid lines as well as the major grid lines. So you can see now I've got some smaller grid lines. So it's looking a bit more like a piece of graph paper. A legend, I think, is going to help. A legend is what you would call a key in geography, and that can go down at the bottom of the page. You can turn on and off trend lines here as well, but we're not going to for this week. We will come back to trend lines later on. So having done all that, I can then go and give this thing a title. So let's just call it air in bottles, for want of a better name. Give the axis a name. So this is the height of air in centimeters. The title here is the time in seconds. That's fine. So those things are changed. Then I can actually edit lots of other elements about this as well. So I think for reading the graph, one thing that you can do quite nicely is format the axis. So to do this, you left click on the axis until you get this box around the numbers, and then right click and you can do format axis. One thing that I think makes it a lot easier to see is to put some tick marks on. So the major ones have got tick marks. So that's the thing that sits just above this number 4, is that little bit that sticks out. So you can put some minor ones on as well, which I kind of think for some reason I find makes it much easier to read where the data points are. So I've got those on that axis. You can also see here I can change the bounds. Now it tends to be for graphs that we don't really like having this big bit of empty space at the end. This one's not too bad, but perhaps it doesn't need to go all the way up to 6. Perhaps it could stop at 5.5. And so our data is just spread out a little bit more than it was previously. It's put the minimum down to minus 0.5, which I don't want it to. So let's do that, and then it has now taken those two values. The major units are 1. Yeah, I think that's sensible. Perhaps I could argue that since I took readings every half a second, I might want half a second major grid lines. Maybe that looks a bit better. And that automatically changed the minor ones to tenths. So that looks fine. Perhaps the numbers are a bit small on the axis, but I mean, that's a judgment call, isn't it? There's nothing too much else I want to change on here. I can go on to my other axis. So I'm just going to close this little window and do some similar things here. So format axis, I'm going to put those tick marks in first because I think it helps me see. And then as I look at it, do I want any more? Well, I only ever measured to the nearest centimetre, so I don't think I really need to have any extra numbers going up here. The spacing has made these things look like they're roughly square, which is quite nice because it kind of reminds us of a piece of graph paper. So this is looking quite like a graph on the outside. The thing that doesn't look much like a graph is these blobs that we've got for the data points. So again, if you left click on one of them, it highlights the whole series. Then if I right click, I can do format data series. Again, you get a little menu over here on the side. Now this menu's got lots of things hidden inside it that is kind of hard to get between. So the first thing on the left, the first thing it comes up with is line. Well, we haven't got a line, but what we have got are markers, and we can change our markers if we go into marker options. So this is kind of convoluted to get to. What we're going to choose is a little cross, like we would do if we plotted a graph ourselves. We can think about how big it is. I think size 5 here is fine. Orange, so this is for the wine bottle. So let's go for a nice, I don't know, let's imagine it's a nice sort of burgundy colour, red. There we are for our marker. When we look at it, they look like they've gone back to blobs, but I'm fairly certain I've still got that selected as crosses. So let's see if that works when I come out of it. Oh, they've gone to, oh, I see, I changed the background, not the foreground. How did I manage to do that? Let's go back to here, marker. So I changed the fill. I want no fill, and I want the border. It must have been the border that I should have changed rather than the fill. There we are. That's not obvious, is it? So there we go. Now they're looking more like data that you'd get on a chart. Let's do the same for the fabric conditioner format data series. And again, this slightly convoluted thing, fill and line, marker, marker options built in. I like the little crosses or even little pluses. Some people prefer. I'm happy with little crosses for now. Size 5, then we want to change their border. So this is for Coke, so I suppose Coke colour is kind of similar to the brownie colour I picked a minute ago. Maybe that one's slightly different. They're going to look pretty similar, aren't they? Let's go black for Coke. Coke's sort of black, isn't it? There we are. Press OK. No, you just close the window. That's those ones. And then the third one is for, oh no, that was fabric conditioner. Oh, I'm not going to change the color again. This one's for Coke. Again, format data series. Fill, marker, marker options. I want crosses. Other than that, I'm going to leave them blue. Sort of fake Tesco's cheap cola or something. So now I've got my data nicely displayed on the chart, and it looks like, you know, it looks pretty close to something like a graph that you might plot in a physics lesson. So we like that. There are other options you can change if you want to. You can change the background, which some people like to play around with to get it to look different. So, you know, oh, horrible. I don't think we really need to get into changing it, and it's going to cause us problems. Oh my God. Okay, so I've made it so that I don't want to do that. I've just made it see-through, haven't I? So don't do that. Let's have it solid filled in white. There we are. Then we don't get the grid lines from behind poking through. One last thing I was going to show you, I had a second graph down here at the bottom, is, I mentioned it, but it's important, is changing the formatting of the maximum and minimum bounds here. So this menu at the side comes up automatically if I click on another element of the chart. But if I want to get to it, go to Format Axis. But here on this chart, as I look, the data sits between values of 20 and 33 or so. So what's important is the same thing applies as to when you plot a graph on a piece of paper. Make sure that the scaling is sensible. So for this particular axis, I want its values to go between 20 and 34 so that the data is nicely spread out. So because you can edit all of these things on Excel, then it's good to get in the habit of editing them on Excel so that you're making the graph look at least as good as, but ideally better than the one that you'd plot on a piece of paper.